Hi, I'm Michael Smith for Nevada Trails. Tonight I have a very, very special show. I have Craig Downer, one of my all-time heroes. And if you go to the Carson Valley Museum, a whole wall is set up from, I assume that it was you created that wall.
Yeah, I was one of the main creators there.
Well, that wall is a history of the wild horses. Also, it has the laws and that were enacted and broken. I assume broken is a big deal. And then I remember, like, part of the walls has the Horse Burro Act.
Yeah, the Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act of 1971, unanimously passed.
When I came to Gardnerville and I went to that museum and saw how much our lives are affected by the wild horses and the work you've done since, I started calling you a long time ago. And I lucked out that Lacey J. Dalton and Willis Lamb invited you to one of my shoots back in, I think it was 2007 or so, in there someplace. Mm-hmm. And we did a show on the wild horses.
Right.
And that was just, and then just by accident, I was lost on Buckeye Road. And I'm seeing this big herd of horses. I'm saying, where's the fence? There was no fence.
Yeah.
And it was like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And then I've never been able to see horses again.
Yeah, there are not as many as there used to be.
No. And then just recently, I think in the fall, a man from the Planning Commission raised a big stink and had the BLM take some horses off the local territory. And I was so upset. And
right.
Do you have any knowledge of what that did to us or what happened?
Yeah, there was Samson, a real famous stallion, and the mares, and the community there in Fish Springs was really behind the horses, practically everyone. They've done that before. They did that in the Deer Run Road in just east of Carson, that road that parallels the foothills of the Pine Nuts and El Dorado Hills and goes on up toward Mound House. But they removed all the horses there too, just because of a few. I think there was 3. Whereas, 250 or so wanted the horses there, but the BLM removed them, and that really tore me up. And a lot of people used to go out there, and they would come down and drink in the river, and all they had to do was get those people to fence out their gardens and put up some slow signs and do some public education. It would have worked out fine for everybody. But yeah, I guess. I understand, though, most of them are still there in that Fish Springs area.
Excellent.
What I'm really torn up about is their removal of 575 from the herd management area up in the northern half of the Pine Nut Range.
I had not heard that.
Yeah, they've almost got them all now. They got quite a few by helicopter, and it's a vast range. It's like 40 miles long, in many places 15, 20 miles wide. There's plenty of niche space there. They're doing it because they're targeting the wild horses, and this is their legal area. They have a right to be there, and they're supposed to be the principal resource recipients. But in fact, they only give them a small fraction of the forage allocation, and that happens throughout the West. And whenever they have a chance, they actually zero them out. And then, ironically, their herd areas that were stipulated in the Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act become vacated of all wild horse and burros, even though they are legal areas. And then they call it a herd management area, where on average they get maybe 15% of the forage allocation in their reduced area. They're almost always reduced from the original herd areas. And then it just gets worse and worse. They fail to fend for their water rights, or they allow some big mining operation to suck the aquifers down because those huge mines consume enormous amounts of water.
Who's the main people? Is it mining or the cattle people that are having problems?
Number one are the cattle and sheep ranchers. Mostly they're cattle, but also the sheep ranchers can be real virulent enemies. The mining and the energy extraction industries also the big game hunters can get on the bandwagon, even though these animals are returned natives in North America. And They are a different type of herbivore with a different type of digestive system. It's called the post-gastric and cecal digestive system.
Well, that's one thing that
which
came up.
is different from the ruminant multi-stomach.
Well, they were trying to tell us at that planning commission meeting that these weren't native horses of the area, and I thought you said that
No,
horses.
the horse period is native to North America.
Well, that's what I
Yeah.
knew you educated us on a previous show.
Yeah,
so
and
a lot of these people are getting false education.
Genetically, no, it's not based on a desire to know the greater truth or what's more just.
Yeah.
It's based on their vested interests.
Yes.
The greed blinds them to the greater story about the horse and the burro too.
Yeah, because the people, the people in horse groups were going to give this man a free fence to solve his problems, and he just wanted to fight with people.
Oh yeah,
And
there are people that seem to have a passionate hatred of horses that are just going back to being who they more truly are.
Yeah.
In nature, where they're one of the most ancient presences.
Yeah. Well, I was
here.
real proud of the horse people that stood up for themselves. The guy didn't get back on the planning commission again. He was not re-serviced, or what they called
Oh,
it.
good.
Yeah, but there was probably 75 to 100 people spoke about how much those horses meant to him.
Yeah.
So I was real proud that I got out there, but I also needed you to tell some of these facts that the
Yeah.
horses
Now,
belong here.
I've been to the laboratory in Finland. I did an exchange, academic, you might say, as well as an enjoyable exchange. I went to Finland. That was in 2010 in the autumn. And I spoke at several universities and schools and to interested people. I was hosted there. And I went to the famous laboratory of Dr. Anna Forsten, famous geneticist, who did an authoritative analysis of the subject. And she determined that what we had been named Equus lambii, or the Yukon horse, was genetically identical to Equus caballus, the modern horse, the common horse we know. So therefore, that put the horse back almost 2 million years for sure, and extrapolating even further, well, it was 1.8 million was the actual carbon-14 dating. And there are numerous fossils and bone evidence. There's petroglyphs. I found some of those. There's pictographs. There's the oral traditions of the Native Americans. And this running horse, Collins, Yvette Running Horse Collins, just earned her doctorate up at the University of Alaska. And
Excellent.
She did a brilliant thesis on why the native, why the horse is native here, and why she believes it never totally died out. And then you have things like Marco Polo's expedition and the Chinese expeditions. They knew what a horse was. And when they came over here to North America, to the land of Fusang, they said, we saw horses up there in the Northwest, up into Canada. So they went down the coast, and they went inland too in their expedition. They saw horses again. They knew the difference between a deer or an elk and a horse. And yet, you see, it gets back to the old saying, there are none so blind as they who will not see.
Well, that's why we got to keep on firing the bullets to say the horses belong here.
Yeah.
And to get the companies that go out there and where you can see the horses from a distance and view these horses. Because like my little experience for, I don't know, maybe 8 minutes is still entrenched in my mind. And I wish I had better connections on the services that could take you out there and look at the horses. But they're just so beautiful. And then it reminds me of me flashing back. Remember that show we did on your poetry?
Oh yeah,
because you watched the wild horses, and I could picture watching the wild horses and words flowing into my mind like you did.
Yeah.
So when I read your book, it was like I could see why you're thinking that way.
Oh yeah, they're very expressive. I consider them highly evolved beings. They're just majestic, and I grew up on a horse, out here, Poco, and he's in the dedication of my book. But the thing about them is they really uplift the vibration. And it's proven that ecologically, they restore balance, and they are much greater at building soils and seeding a variety of seeds than the ruminants, because of their the ruminants really thoroughly digest things. So their droppings don't contribute as much to what's called humus, which is a vital characteristic of soils, as any gardener will tell you. And because the horses and the burros and also the tapirs and the rhinos, they're all in the same order, Parasodactyla, and that's my specialty as a biologist and ecologist. Well, they don't as thoroughly digest. Therefore, they're feeding the ecosystem. They're making soils that are more nutrient rich and more moisture retaining. And that's wonderful, and that's really major too. And
So they're like their own little crop system or crop rotating.
Yeah, and
just by having horses.
Yeah, oh yeah, and in my PowerPoint, I show I break it down to the facts and figures. Like a horse produces so many tons of manure every year. The horse is highly mobile, moves all over the place. It disperses a lot more intact seeds. It's needed. It's not that I'm against the ruminants. I just think they're needed for balance. So when the law says that they contribute to the to enrich the diversity of the life forms in our nation, that's absolutely true, and especially because they're a different type of herbivore. And another thing has to do with their hooves. They have rounded, spade-like hoofs. They're blunt and rounded, whereas the cloven hoof animals, like the big bulls and cows, they're breeding them bigger than ever now, too. Mm-hmm. So you see enormous ones out there, a cow and her calf. The rancher is only paying $1.35. That's the minimum that he has to pay, you know. And they brought it down. It was up to $1.80 or so. But, you know, in other words, our government is trying to make our public lands into big ranch, basically. Either a ranch or a mining operation, or another thing is they're allowing the off-road vehicles to have terrible impact. Another thing, you know, too, they bow down a lot to the big game hunters, so that's in. And then they all gang up against the horse. And I just think it's wrong. And then they concoct all kinds of skewed information, filtered facts. And the proof of this is that there's this film out called Horse Rich and Dirt Poor that was produced by a guy who had been Ben Masters, a young recent graduate, is a biologist from Colorado. And he got in with some of the traditional put-downers of the wild horses, including the Nevada Department of Wildlife. And they just did a number on the horse. And I was really beside myself when I saw that. So I immediately, even though I had to go to New Zealand the next week, I tore out to where they had filmed it, and blaming the horses for a real devastated spring area in northeastern Nevada.
Oh, geez.
Called the Dolly Varden. And I went there to document. I went with my little camcorder, and I said I knew that because I had been there on a field trip recently. I'd been going there for years. And that area had traditionally been pounded, especially by sheep, going clear back into the 1800s. And to just say, because the horses were coming into water by association, to take a few little clips and then say they were responsible was very deceptive. And it really made my blood boil. So I did go out and I filmed that, and then I went a little ways north and I showed where the horses were and where everything was fine. You could even see where their droppings were creating rich soil. And, you know, they're in April, that was in mid-April, and the grass was springing up and everything. And at their showing, I denounced it. I said, you know, this is a very biased film, and you're targeting the wild horses and you're not telling the whole story. So I got together with a Southern California filmmaker, and we produced The Mustang Man.
Excellent.
Yeah, and it's gotten several thousand views now, and we're welcoming Matter of fact, we could show clips of that if you'd like. I have it on a flash drive.
Excellent. Well, let's
Yeah.
consider getting this
Yeah.
out there, and then we're going to do another show on. We'll put that in there
Yeah,
as well.
basically, you know, I speak up for the horses because I feel very identified with them, and I feel very strongly about their right to live a free and natural life. I'm not of the mind that the only good horse is a slave horse. I think that I recognize I've taken the time to study into it. You know, I've had years of education and looked into it. I've been out in the field. And, you know, it means too much. And plus, I think they have a real saving role to play.
Well, I know
Yeah.
between Kids and Horses has used some wild horses they adopted. And then they take care of Down syndrome people, kids.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I personally was beaten to near death in Detroit, and I was in a program with horses. And what I didn't know is the horse kind of makes you feel like precious cargo.
Yeah.
I was scared to death to be on a horse, to be honest, because I had grown up with horses, but now I was fragile and I wasn't in control. But I didn't know that the horse's muscles were exercising my muscles, my legs.
Yeah.
Because I was
Yeah.
losing the use of my legs. That's a scary thing.
Yeah.
And then the horses, they were very docile, and as I got confidence, they got confidence. They created more reasons for me to be more confident. And we kind of bonded with our own horse. And then when I moved here, like years later, between Kids and Horses was one thing I really tried to get out there for helping the Down syndrome kids. And but also now there's between horses and humans. Mm-hmm. And like those kids had like something traumatic, like say your parents end up in prison or something, or well, like my friend's dad died as a kid and he went through major depression. Those horses help them get through that. That program does. And I think they have wild horses too that they adopted and brought in. So
Yeah.
the horses that are coming in from that we're actually saving are helping humans. And but I think still, when you see it as a tourism thing, I think we can make more money helping the tourism of this county and other counties by just having people come and look at the wonder of the wild horses in the distance.
Yeah.
And why they don't, they
photographers.
can't think about money.
Yeah.
Tourism for tourism state is beyond me.
The problem, Michael, is that they had, for a long time, they've been a political football.
Exactly.
Which is linked to the historic suppression of the Native American and the put down of the predators like the wolf and the bears. And likewise, you know, these people say, hey, well, we don't really want to share with the wild horses. We've decided that we don't want them to be part of our lifestyle. They're okay as you know, a domestic horse and helping us, but being themselves out in the wild, no, we don't want to do that. And to me, that is so wrong. I just feel it's one of the most unjust things that I can imagine. That's why I don't condone it. And if it crops up, I've worked for government agencies and whatnot, and if I see this blind prejudice surfacing, I immediately denounce it. And maybe that's why I don't always last long in the position, but I just feel obligated. It's like a calling with me, and that's why I wrote my book.
That's exactly what you had in my mind. The Wild Horse Conspiracy by Craig Downer. And you can get it on Amazon, I probably, right?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or through me, and you can call up my website, which is the same as the title of the book, thewildhorseconspiracy.org. And I also have another website called the AndeanTaperFund.com, which tells about my work to save the endangered mountain tapir or Andean tapir in the northern Andes.
Didn't you discover that tapir yourself? It's something that you
yeah, I'm the first. I didn't discover. That was discovered by Xavier Roulin, a Frenchman, back in the early 1800s. But I'm the first one to have captured radio collared and tracked. I had support from the Wildlife Conservation Society.
Excellent.
And must have gone on well over a decade, maybe 12, 15 years I was involved with that, but most intensively about 8 years, very intensive study I did.
Well, the tapir's another story that you've been trying to help them as well.
Yeah, and they're related to, they're very horse-like. I mean, they're all in the same order. And I have this PowerPoint, and that's why the Nelson Science Society invited me to come in May, on May 7th. I ended up spending a month in New Zealand, and I have a really brilliant talk on the world's endangered species, which I offer, and so keep that in mind. It's called "The World's Endangered Species Today Present a Crisis of Conscience for Humanity." And it's just a brilliant message that came to me. And then I usually go on and give my PowerPoint. Now I have two PowerPoints. One is on the America's Wild Horses and Burros, which I've just offered to give to the Pinot Wild Horse Group. Mary Chioffi contacted.
Is that something we can do today and put that on for the What Show?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we
Well,
can. And then my other
look
one
forward
is...
to seeing it on the What Show soon,
Okay.
too. We'll
Yeah.
go ahead and tape his PowerPoint, and we'll get that out there, too.
And then the other one is on the parasidactyls of the world, and that's members of the horse, tapir, and rhino families. And 13 of 17 are on the red list of endangered or threatened species. So it's an order that's disappearing from the earth. Many of the species or subspecies are in critical danger of extinction, and some have gone extinct.
Actually, I have kind of a silly question about the rhinos. I didn't know you were into rhinos, but
Oh, yeah.
did you ever see that movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy?
Yeah, I did, with the Coke bottle and
Yeah.
all that.
Well, in that movie, they had it where the rhino would come in and stomp out the fires the guys had made for, to scare away creatures. He'd come in and put out the fire. Is that something the rhinos really do?
Well, yeah, I did a lot of further research to put together this PowerPoint on the parasidactyls of the world. And I learned that the white rhino in certain nations of Africa, South Africa and others, do create a nice little mowed lawn, affect meadows, and they greatly reduce the risk of real damaging or catastrophic fires.
Well, that's what I was thinking,
Yeah.
too, because in nature, you actually need the fires, but you got to have some certain safety areas for some creatures to survive, because they can't all burrow.
Yeah, and another thing is these wild horses out here, wild burros, with their wallows and their trails and everything, and their broad mobility, and then munching down the coarser, drier vegetation, which they can process easier than most ruminants with their more thorough digestive system. They actually also greatly mitigate or even prevent these catastrophic wildfires.
Well, that's what I thought, too, that all these years you've been trying to say that the wild horses help save our land from these fires.
Because they enrich soil. And then the other point is their droppings create moisture-retaining soils, so they're elevating the water tables, the aquifers.
Well, didn't even their hoof prints create a little bit of water retention for the other animals to have water?
Yeah, and when they wallow also, or their footprints, you have to look at the details, and the saying is, the devil's in the details. But once you get on it, it's really fascinating. Now, I have a project called Reserve Design, which I believe is the fulfillment of the true intent of the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act. And I have a GoFundMe. You can look it up. It's just called MSTNG Reserve Design. It's a GoFundMe. So as I get limited funding, I'm out of here. I'm going all over the place. I've been up to Canada. I've helped save a herd there west of Sundre near just above Banff. I've been to Salt River, did ecological evaluation there. I've been to the Kygers and the Steens up in Oregon. I've been to the Pryor Mountains where the famous cloud herd is. I just keep going.
I've heard of the cloud herd.
Oh, yeah. The famous Ginger Catherine's filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, so also people can, it's on my website, or you can just type in Reserve Design or something, if you want to help me out, because I just get by on shoestring, but I don't require luxury. I camp out. And
every time I talk to you, you're out helping people. I know you spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C., too.
Yeah. 2 times I've delivered my petition, Stop the Excessive Roundups. And it's getting more, it seems to be getting more extreme. Obviously it is with the current administration. This so-called path forward for the wild horse and burros is a path that will annihilate the wild horse.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's right. And I went there and vehemently protested that and gave them my 12,000. I gave everyone a copy of my my petition, and but you just got to have faith, I guess. You know that it's eventually going to catch hold, and I believe there's going to be a big change. There has to be.
Well, we need some help, and before we wrap up, I want to reiterate the wild horse conspiracy. You know, Craig C. Downer, and make sure you get a copy and get yourself updated on what's going on. And go ahead and repeat the GoFundMe page, how people can find you.
It's GoFundMe.com/MSTNG Reserve Design. And also check out my new YouTube, The Mustang Man. Craig C. Downer, exonerating wild horse and burros, fighting to keep them free, that I did with Tom Porter down in Southern California.
Excellent. And then do you have an email or a contact phone number?
Oh yeah. You can reach me at 775-901-2094 or at ccdowner@AOL.com.
Well, thank you, Craig, for being on Nevada Trails.
It's a real pleasure, and appreciate your support.
We'll get that.
We've got to restore these animals. They're trying to mow them down to hardly anything. They won't be genetically viable. They'll be squeezed, and then, in other words, they're trying to make a mockery. So it depends upon the people of America to stand up and say, no, this is a quality of life issue. Besides that, it was our promise to honor these wonderful animals who have done so much for us by giving them a small portion of the public lands wherein to truly be themselves and fill their beautiful natural role in our world.
Well, you got to help him fight the fight, and he's been doing it for a long time. And thank you for being on the show, and thank you for watching. It's been Michael Smith for Nevada Trails. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks.